In the latest episode of our podcast, Into the Killing, we talk about the case of Randy Laufer. In 1987, when Randy was 15, he went missing after leaving school in Harrison, Michigan. At first, his family and the police thought that he ran away. But then, the police learned that a man who lived in the same neighborhood was a convicted child killer who had spent 2 decades in prison. Not only that, but the police suspected that the serial killer may have killed more boys. But despite the suspicions of the police, it would still take decades before justice was served. You can find Into the Killing on Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But before we get into today's video, we're just going to take a short break to bring you a word from our sponsor, Keen Psychics. Are you looking for insights on life's challenges? Do you need clarity when it comes to love, relationships, your career, and other aspects of your life? Keen Psychics may be able to provide the answers you are looking for. Keen is an affordable way to get instant psychic readings by professionals at any time, 24/7. Keen offers a variety of psychic services like tarot card readings, astrology advice, and they even have mediums that can communicate with deceased loved ones. As a new Keen customer, you can try your first 10 minutes for only $1.99. After that, pricing depends on the advisor you choose. The good news is that all their services are backed with a satisfaction guarantee. It's the most affordable way to meet your new advisors. When you find the perfect advisor, you can have an ongoing relationship where you do things like monthly intention setting, you can get clarity on the significance of synchronicities, chakra cleaning, and so much more. Also, every week, Keen sends their users discounts on readings. Why not check out Keen Psychics for yourself today? Get your first 10 minutes for $1.99 by going to trykeen.com/listed. Find the answers you're looking for and help support criminalists in the process by checking out trykeen.com/listed. Number 3. Scott Falater. On the night of January 17, 1997, Greg Coons was drawn out of his home in Phoenix, Arizona because he heard a strange sound. Once he was outside, he figured out that the sound came from the backyard of his neighbors, the Falaters. He looked into his neighbor's backyard and he noticed that one of his neighbors, 42-year-old Yarmela Falater, was lying beside her pool. He then saw Yarmela's husband, 41-year-old Scott Falater, walk outside and roll his wife into the pool and then hold her head under the water. Coons went inside and phoned the police. The police arrived at the family's house and they found Yarmela dead in the pool. Her body was pulled out and it was clear she had been stabbed dozens of times. A medical examiner would later determine she had been stabbed 44 times. The police followed a blood trail that led them to the garage. In the garage, there was a car. They looked in the trunk and they found that the tire well was ajar. A detective looked in the tire well and found some plastic bags. In the bags were a pair of bloody jeans and a Tupperware container. In the container was a 10-inch hunting knife, which was later proved to be the weapon that was used to stab Yarmela. It was quite clear to the police that Scott was the killer, and they thought it was a crime of passion. Yarmela wasn't wearing her wedding ring when she was killed. The police thought that the couple got into a fight and Yarmela took off her wedding ring. Scott grabbed the knife and lured Yarmela out to the yard. He stabbed her until she stopped moving. When he was done, he hid his jeans and the weapon in the tire well, then he went inside and washed up. He then came back outside and he saw that Yarmela was alive, so he drowned her. Scott was arrested and brought to the police station. He said that he didn't remember the murder. Scott was then indicted for murder. When Scott Falater went to trial in June 1999, his defense was that he was sleepwalking when he killed his wife. Since he was sleepwalking, he was not in control of his body, therefore, he was not guilty of killing his wife. The defense had several sleepwalking experts testify, and they said that someone who was sleepwalking could stab someone to death, hide the evidence, wash up, and then drown someone without waking up. The defense also showed that Scott had a history of sleepwalking, and so did several people in his family. Around the time of the murder, he had also been severely stressed out about work. The experts also testified that stress is known to lead to sleepwalking. Finally, the defense argued that Scott was a good family man. He was a Mormon who provided for his family by working as an electrical engineer. The defense argued he simply wasn't capable of willingly killing his wife in such a brutal fashion. The prosecutors also had several experts testify. Their experts said it would have been impossible for someone to stab a person, hide the evidence, wash up, and then hold their hand under some water, all while sleepwalking. Scott Falater was found guilty, and at the urging of his 2 children, he was given life without parole instead of the death penalty. At the time of this video, 65-year-old Scott Falater is serving a sentence at the Arizona State Prison Complex in Yuma, Arizona. Number 2. Joseph Anthony Mitchell. In September 2010, the Mitchell family lived in Durham County, South Carolina. Christine Parolini and Joseph Anthony Mitchell met in the early 1990s in an emergency room in New York. Christine was a nursing assistant and Joseph was an emergency medical technician. They started dating, and a few years later, Christine became pregnant. She gave birth to a daughter, Alexis. In 1998, Christine and Joseph got married. The following year, Christine gave birth to a son, Devon. When Devon was still an infant, Christine and Joseph decided they wanted their kids to grow up in a quiet and safe area. They ended up purchasing a house in Durham County. In February 2006, Christine gave birth to a son whom they named Blake. In Durham County, Joseph had several jobs, but he never stayed in one position for very long. He finally landed a good job with a financial institution. But then he lost that job in 2008 during the global financial crisis. After that, Joseph couldn't find a job. The family kept getting deeper and deeper into financial trouble. The relationship between Joseph and Christine became more turbulent. But by all accounts, Joseph seemed to be a caring and loving father. He was often seen outside playing with his children, and he coached their soccer teams. With Joseph being out of work for nearly 2 years, the family's financial troubles continued. Near the end of summer 2010, the bank had started the process of foreclosing on their house. On the night of September 21st, 2010, the family was all in bed by 9 p.m. In the middle of the night, 13-year-old Alexis burst into the master bedroom and woke up her mother, Christine. Alexis said that her father had been trying to hurt them. Christine got out of bed and she heard Joseph fall and slump against the door of the home office. Because he was lying against the door, she couldn't get into the office. Christine went and checked on her children. 10-year-old Devon was alive and breathing, but he had also been attacked. Joseph had tried to suffocate both Alexis and Devon, but he had stopped when they fought him off. On Alexis's bed was a Halloween mask. Sadly, 4-year-old Blake was not breathing. 911 was called. A nurse who lived on the street was awoken, and she raced to the house and tried to get Blake breathing again. Unfortunately, despite her best efforts, she couldn't. Blake was rushed to the hospital. Sadly, the 4-year-old was pronounced dead not long after arriving at the hospital. Meanwhile, back at the Mitchells' home, a police officer was able to get into the office. He found 46-year-old Joseph Mitchell unconscious and a knife was in his hand. He had stabbed himself 3 times in the chest and slit his throat. He was also taken to the hospital. Unlike his son, Joseph survived his injuries. The police were quickly able to piece together the events of the night. Joseph put on a Halloween mask and attacked his children. He then went into the office and tried to take his own life. Joseph was charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder. Joseph Mitchell's trial started in February 2015. He testified on his own behalf. He said that he loved his children and he never wanted to hurt them. He said that he had been under a tremendous amount of stress and he had not been able to sleep. A forensic psychologist testified and he said that Joseph suffered from non-REM parasomnia. It's a sleep disorder where the sufferer can perform random acts while unconscious. Another psychiatrist who interviewed Joseph 4 times testified. She said she saw no signs of mental illness that would have led him to unconsciously attack his children. She believed that was a premeditated attack. The trial lasted about 3 weeks. Then the jury went to deliberate. A little over an hour into their deliberations, they asked the judge if they could find Joseph guilty of manslaughter. The judge said no because he wasn't charged with manslaughter. They could find him guilty of first-degree murder or second-degree murder or acquit him. The jury deliberated for 3 more hours. They found Joseph not guilty on all counts, including the attempted murder charges. Many people were shocked by the verdict. The person who was probably the most shocked by the verdict was the mother of the children, Christine. She and Joseph had divorced after Blake was killed. Christine started hyperventilating and she had to be taken out of the courtroom on a stretcher. Joseph Mitchell, who spent nearly 4 years in jail awaiting his trial, was released after being acquitted. When members of the jury were asked why they acquitted Joseph, they said that the district attorney had not proved that there was malice or intent in his actions, which was needed to find him guilty of first-degree or second-degree murder. They wanted to find him guilty of manslaughter. Since they couldn't do that, they had no choice but to acquit him. The district attorney said that they did not want to give the jury the choice of finding him guilty of manslaughter because they did not think it was appropriate. It's unknown what happened to Joseph Mitchell after he was acquitted. He has stayed out of the media spotlight. His current whereabouts are unknown. Number 1. Joan Kiger. In 1943, 49-year-old Carl Kiger was the vice mayor of Covington, Kentucky. He lived in an upscale house with his wife, his 3 sons, and his daughter. He was an ambitious man, but he was also paranoid. He kept several guns in his house, including one under his pillow. He also kept all the doors and windows of the house locked. He even did this on the hottest summer nights. On the night of August 17, 1943, Carl, his wife, and 3 of his children were home sleeping. One of his sons was a Marine, and he was away on duty. Late that night, the neighbors were startled by someone pounding on their door. They opened the door, and they found Carl's only daughter, 15-year-old Joan, standing in the doorway. Joan said that there had been a shooting at their house and she needed help. The police arrived and they found Carl dead in his bed and his wife Jenny had been shot in the hip, but she was alive. Sadly, their 6-year-old son Jimmy had also been shot to death. The other Kiger child was found unharmed. The police searched the house and they found $1,440 pinned behind the couch. They learned that the money was probably from illegal payoffs from slot machines. This led the police to immediately suspect that the shooting was a mob hit. But then they noticed some unusual things. The first was that every point of entry into the house was locked because Carl was paranoid. But there were no signs of a break-in. Also, 3 guns were used in the shooting and they all belonged to Carl. The police then questioned the family members. They also hypnotized Joan. While Joan was under hypnosis, she confessed to shooting her family members and she tried to kill herself, but she ran out of bullets. After Joan confessed under hypnosis, she and her mother Jenny told the police what had happened. Jenny said that she woke up when she first heard the shooting. She said that Joan was screaming that there were robbers in the house and they were shooting everyone. Jenny then realized that no one else was in the house and it was Joan who was doing the shooting. Moments after she realized what was going on, Joan shot her. She then heard her son Jimmy calling out for help. She saw Joan walk towards his room, there were more shots, and then Jimmy went silent. Joan then came back into the master bedroom. Jenny said she pulled on the gun, and this woke Joan up. Joan said the first thing she remembered was holding a revolver in one hand. The police and the district attorney's office did not think that the scenario was plausible. 15 shots were fired and 3 targets were hit. They thought that was remarkable aim for someone who was sleepwalking. Also, why didn't the sound of the gunshots wake Joan up? The investigators thought it was more likely that, for some unknown reason, Jenny and Joan wanted Carl dead. Joan shot Jenny to cover up the fact that she was involved because it made her look like one of the victims. But they ran into a problem because the shooting woke up 6-year-old Jimmy and he might have been able to tell the police what happened, so Joan shot him to silence him. Both Jenny and Joan were indicted 5 months after the murders, but only Joan went to trial for the murder of her brother. At the trial, the prosecution said that the sleepwalking defense was the only plausible explanation they had, and that's why they were using it. Joan's defense lawyer had several people testify that her father Carl used to have very vivid dreams about robbers and home invaders attacking him. Jenny and several other people who knew the family testified that Joan started to have similar dreams when she became a teenager. 2 doctors testified that it was totally possible that Joan could have picked up a gun in each hand, fired off all the rounds, picked up a 3rd gun and emptied that gun as well, hit 3 targets that were all lying in bed, all while sleepwalking. Finally, the defense argued that Joan had no motive to kill her brother. Joan was found not guilty of killing her brother because the jury did not think she was conscious when she did the shooting. For her father's murder, Joan agreed to a plea deal and she ended up spending a year in a psychiatric hospital. After she was released, she moved to Louisville and she became a school teacher. She died in 1991 when she was in her mid-60s and her body was donated to science. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our podcast, Into the Killing. In our latest episode, we look at a suspected serial killer who almost got away with murder. You can find Into the Killing on Deezer, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.